morning.
Morning.
I've been thinking a lot about an event in history that affects all spiritually and that has lessons for all of us today. And it's an event that has a lot of components of a mystery. It has something very touching and moving. There's thrills and chills. There's romance, money, and tragedy. I'm talking about, well, the Fox sisters. I want to talk about the Fox sisters. Raise your hand if you know the story of the Fox sisters. Okay, that's not everyone. So I'll make it short so that those who are familiar with the events in 1848 don't have to listen through it again. But in summary, in upstate New York in the 1840s, try to imagine life. There were no cars, no electric lights. This was the time of horses, oil lamps, candles. And if you wanted heat, it was from your fireplace. There was a family headed up by John Fox. John Fox was a local blacksmith and farmer. And this was a very rural area. This was not New York City. Nowhere close. Kind of close to Canada. There was a small cottage, and the family had undergone quite a bit, and they were looking to move. So this cottage was appealing because it was available and it was affordable. Catch was, everyone in the area knew the stories that it was haunted. So the people who had lived in the cottage reported hearing noises and phenomena, and they had moved out. No one stayed there for very long. In fact, in the area, a traveling salesman that was going cottage to cottage disappeared. So there were a lot of rumors and talk about that house in Hydesville, New York. But the Fox family needed a place, so they didn't pay any heed to that, and they moved in. The Fox family at that time was John, his wife, Margaret, and their daughters, Margaretta, known as Maggie, who was 14 years old, and their other daughter, Kate, who was 11. So they moved in, and shortly thereafter, they, on New Year's Eve of 1847, began hearing bang, 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 rapping. They were awakened by the noise. Do you hear that? Yes, I hear that. They couldn't identify where this knocking or rapping was coming from. Was it coming from the wall? Was it coming from the floor? What's going on? You know, with their candles, looking around. Girls were frightened too, huddled together in their bed. Very cold at night in a cabin in the winter. It settled down and they went back to sleep. Problem is, this continued. It continued. Nights on end of all kinds of noises. And John, being practical, was trying to figure out what was it? Was it a neighbor hammering? Was it a party at another cottage? Maybe there were rats in the cellar, knocking things over. But no matter what they did, they couldn't find the source of the phenomena, all these noises. So by the time it was March of that year, and this had gone on, the teenage girls were kind of getting used to it and just trying to figure out what next. So tensions were at an all-time high on March 31st. And the girls had talked, if it is a spirit, to each other, why don't we try to see if we can talk to the spirit and see what it is that they need, like why are they banging? So the girls began trying to figure out how to communicate. So one thing they did was, and they heard, and so then they would go. It's understanding us. And that began trial and error, the start of communicating with a spirit. And it went on from that night to the next day, same thing. And they tried doing 1 for yes, 2 for no. And the system just continued to try to communicate, to ask the spirit questions. So this was such a big deal at the time that the parents invited the neighbor over. Same thing. The spirit responded. And then more neighbors came over. And it turned into the whole neighborhood, and then half the town were lined up to hear and witness it. In fact, they would hold up 1 finger. They'd hold up 2 fingers. And that began the story of the Fox sisters. The story is long and it goes on and on. But to shorten it, what happened was the girls were taken to New York City, where they demonstrated the phenomena on a stage. And the interest just grew. It just grew. Now the problem was, over time, their older sister, Leah, who didn't live with the family, she already had a family, decided she better step in and manage the girls because their family weren't with them all the time, and this was a lot. So long story short, Leah was a businesswoman, and she wanted to have a show and have the girls perform nightly. And they did. It got to be quite a thing. At first, there was no charge, but as time went on, well, there became a charge to attend. And it went on and on. But unfortunately, the girls, well, they fell into a lot of fame very quickly. Kind of like Britney Spears and Justin Bieber's of their day. So young, teenagers, and befriended by very powerful people in New York. So what had happened soon was they did adult things when children grow up too quick, like try substances, alcohol, and were courted by grown men. So they grew up very quickly. And the ending of the story, you might imagine, wasn't pretty. What occurred was the girls really had a lot of difficulty managing their success and all the pressures upon them. One of the girls married a man who was Catholic, and he insisted she become Catholic too. So what had become the start of this glorious religion and science and eventually a philosophy of spiritualism, at its peak, 8 million followers, was all in awe of the girls. And then in 1888, as a grown woman, many years later, the girls are having financial trouble because they're doing a stage show at this point, and they're not being honest. They have fallen into making it entertainment and trying to recreate what actually happened to them. And so Maggie's husband, Catholic, said, I need you to convert to Roman Catholicism or we're done. I need you to get rid of all this and come to the church and renounce it. And so, because her and all her sisters were trying to support their family and all the things that they had gotten into and the money they had lost, a newspaper man offered her the equivalent of $48,000 for an exclusive story if she said it was all a fake. And she did it. She needed the money. So she gave an expose and it was published. And she got the cash, went through the cash. And by the next year, was so remorseful that she had done this just for money, that she decided to come clean and told 4 people on the record that she was renouncing what she had confessed in the expose and that she had done it for money, and that spirit communication was real, and that she was so sorry for the damage that she had done to spiritualism, and that she wasn't coerced or paid for this recantation, but that it was between God and her spirit guides and her conscience to come clean and say that while they had done some trickery, the fact of the matter was, it was true that spirit communication and all of the start was real. That was the last thing she said on the matter. And the girls died young. And so that is the sad, tragic ending. But what can we learn from the Fox story? This event in history. What we can learn once we know that after they pass, that in 1904, in excavating underneath the cottage where they lived, they found human remains. And the human remains that had other garbage in it, chicken bones, all kinds of stuff, because sometimes, there was no Laidlaw garbage truck picking up your garbage back in the 1840s. So sometimes you buried it downstairs in the cellar. So they found the scalp, some hair and bones and human bones, and concluded it was the traveling salesman, Charles B. Rosna, and that he had gone missing. And the Bell family, it turns out, were highly suspected of doing away with this traveling salesman, keeping his wares and his money and burying his body in the basement. which then began a series of rappings and him trying to communicate for his family and his loved ones that what had happened to him. And the girls were the first ones that he had reached. So their story lined up, all of it, the good, the bad, lines up. And what can we learn? What we can learn is just because a person makes a mistake, it doesn't do away with their initial goodness. And that includes you and me. If a person knew every single hour of every single day of any of our lives, all our secrets, and then they were a reporter and wrote a biography of our life to sell newspapers, do you think they could turn it and make it sound pretty bad somehow? I do. I think that they could make anyone sound terrible. Some of the mistakes that we've made were when we were much younger in life. But if the rule is that everything is baloney and you are a terrible person, if you make a mistake in life, then everything before that mistake and everything after that mistake doesn't count, well, there would be no role models or mentors left. When it comes to the Fox sisters, judging makes some people feel better. And so that's why people are so hard on these girls. They were just children. And we're all trying to feel better. So I know that. And I won't be one to judge the judges. So I want to just let them be, the judgers and the Fox sisters, for their mistakes and move on. I think that we all can make this life better by making each day better for one another, one day at a time. So we can aim to be that person that is truthful and says nothing if we're tempted to be untruthful, lying, exaggerating, and omitting facts in the past. Well, there's something we cannot change. But the doorway to reformation is never closed. And that means we're different today, in each day. I was talking to Reverend Maurice Coberson about this. And we were talking, and she agreed. She said, who among us hasn't broken a law at some point, whether it was small? We've all done something. We have to let it be and move on. But it's not just ourselves, it's for others, including people that are famous. The other thing I want us all to learn from this, and I'll try to keep it short because I know we got into the story of the Fox sisters. We each can help to guide the young people in our lives. This is really important. And it's not just the duty of parents and teachers, it's us. So maybe just a few of us are grandparents or parents, but most of us are either aunts or uncles or great aunts or uncles, or maybe we even have younger second cousins, friends and neighbors who have kids, grandkids. And even if you don't see one young person in your day after day, if you have the time to volunteer, you could volunteer somewhere like the Y or some project with at-risk kids, where they can use someone just like you who's reliable, responsible, dependable. We had someone, Malcolm, from here that wrote a book for kids, and that could indirectly and directly affect a child. So in some ways, we are all the Fox sisters, each of us. And the kids out there on the streets of Chicago are also the Fox sisters. Without an adult with a child day and night asking them questions like, hey, why are you doing that? What were you thinking when you were doing that? Why are you going with that person when you know that? You can't tell kids what to do when they're Kate and Maggie Fox's age, but you can ask them questions that get them thinking that you care about them and you want them to think about what they do for their sake. In conclusion, we need to take the time to hold in our hearts the Fox sisters and see them as children who lost their way without their parents with them. We need to know that spiritualism doesn't worship those girls or any savior or any leader. We don't follow a person. We follow our own moral compass and follow the natural laws of right and wrong. So what is it that we learned from the start of spiritualism in 1848 in New York? We learned that that's just the beginning, and it continues today with you and with me. Thank you.